Backstage, are we ready?
Oh,
We're live.
yeah. TJ, you can still hear us.
Here we are.
This is the Black Powder Podcast. I wanted to emphasize cast because everybody has a podcast these days, but there's only one true libertarian podcast that has ever existed in the history of mankind. And currently you are listening or watching it.
You're struggling.
It's just so emotional when I bring this podcast into the realm of human existence. And as somewhat usual, I am joined by my other host. That's the Ebonics. I got my guy Tub coming out of Jacksonville, Florida. How you doing, Tub?
I'm well, and let's be very clear that we are the only usual and we are the only normal people on this podcast.
Oh, that's an underhanded slight that I will pass on to Eric Parker, my other host on this podcast. How you doing, my good man?
I'm doing great, and I'd just like to point out our guest is probably the only semi-normal person on this podcast. Let's keep it real.
That's yet to be seen. We have to be fair to everybody. That's yet to be seen. But indeed, we have a very special guest tonight because he's an elected official from the great Commonwealth of Kentucky. Now, some people want to say state. It is actually one of the few Commonwealths that we have in this grand land of the United States of America. Everybody take a moment to salute.
Woo!
Apparently, I'm the only real American here.
I'm with you. Let's go.
So, without further ado, I want to bring to the stage our guest tonight, State Representative from the Great Commonwealth of Kentucky, Mr. TJ Roberts. How you doing tonight, my good man?
Doing well, being on the show with you guys, especially. So, thank you all for having me on.
No problem. Tub, don't interrupt the man when he's saying great things about this podcast.
Why am I even here? Why did I even sign on for this? I could listen. I have other things I could be doing. Hey, TJ, listen. I like you. I hate these other two. Let's see how this goes. All right.
You know what? I don't like myself on the bottom, so I'm gonna move myself up here with my guy. I feel like I'm on the same level as State Representative Roberts, where I'm a somewhat elected official. As the only real libertarian in the Libertarian Party, I feel like it's my duly elected privilege to put myself above my hosts down there, those two guys.
So,
listen,
speaking of, that's a great segue. Hey, TJ, I was reading your bio, and I saw when you first registered to vote, you actually registered as a libertarian. Is that correct?
I did register as a libertarian when I was 17 years old because in Kentucky you can register at 17 as long as you'll be 18 at the next election cycle. When I was 19, I switched over to Republican, just figured that was actually the best vehicle for pursuing the cause of liberty. And there might be disagreement there. That being said, I think we're getting these really good results, and there's this new fusionism where the cause of liberty is alive and well, and we're kind of seeing Ron Paul and Pat Buchanan's movement in the 90s largely driving not necessarily the elected officials of the Republican Party, but most certainly the undercurrent of the movement that is coming of age. And that can be shown. Young people like me, I'm 27. I'm the second youngest elected official in Kentucky in the state house. And, the young bloods, we're the ones that are really like getting back into that honest money, ending the endless wars, getting the national debt in check, actually meaning it when we make a pledge to the entire Bill of Rights. I mean, I introduced a bill that would have authorized Kentuckians in Kentucky to use Kentucky parts to make machine guns at home without going through the NFA process. Didn't move, but that's one of those things where it's like, that's a pretty hardcore position that is starting to go through. And it largely is the pressure that you guys are putting because, let's be clear. Republicans have lost elections because their incumbents or their nominees were not pro-liberty enough to get people to say, this is the candidate that is going to adequately protect my rights, my liberty, make sure that I have enough money in my pocket to adequately raise a family on my property the way I see properly. So yeah, I was a libertarian for a little bit, and then I turned 19 and decided to go with the GOP. I mean, and here in Kentucky, let's face it, we have a pretty good GOP representation with Rand Paul, with my congressman, Thomas Massey. We have really great state reps too. I mean, we have Steve Doan, who he came out of the 10th Amendment Center. That's where he got his start in politics, was reading 10th Amendment Center articles. You have Savannah Maddox, who was one of the first elected officials in the country to come out against the lockdown. She was doing it in March 17, 2020. She was joining those fights with me. So we have some there's just something in the water in Kentucky. It might be the bourbon, but all in all, I think it's clear that the Republican Party, at least in Kentucky, is going in a drastically more pro-liberty direction than it ever has been. I look forward to seeing that direction that would continue to go down.
But
I
you
was going
missed
to
the
ask
guy.
you.
I'm sorry, but he missed the
Go
guy.
ahead. Who?
There's one more senator in Kentucky, isn't there?
Oh yeah, y'all got to get that guy out of there.
I'm trying to think of his name real quick.
Mitch McConnell,
well,
right?
he will not be running for re-election. And I can tell you this much: the candidates that have gone that are jumping in, they are, in my view, marked improvements. All three of them have great things about them. I'm not here to say which one anyone should support. I've worked with all three of them on various issues, and there's very, very good things in the future, in my opinion. I think the Republican Party realizes that, and I think that the candidates realize that too. That if they want to continue to have success, they have to realize that when we say the role of government is protecting life, liberty, and property, that means both economic and personal liberty. That fundamentally means a system built on voluntarism, understanding that institutions of faith, institutions of family are far more equipped to organize society than a monopoly on violence.
Indeed. I just brought up that guy because I wanted to congratulate you on actually getting rid of him. And that's why, because he's been an impediment to the America moving forward for damn near 40 years, almost 50 years, actually. So that's the only reason I brought him up. It wasn't gotcha or anything.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean,
so,
go ahead, Eric.
I was actually going to say earlier or ask you, like, what's in the water, or is there a factory in Kentucky that's making pro-liberty candidates, or is it just I don't know, is it the coal mines, the hollers? What's going on there?
It's the coal mines, it's the hollers, it's the bourbon. Up in northern Kentucky, though, we're very blessed to have a very active Tea Party that didn't just immediately get co-opted by the swamp. This area was the launching point of Rand Paul and Thomas Massey's movements. And Northern Kentucky respects that. And that's the thing that's remarkable is, like, this area is very clear. We don't care for the Washington, D.C. pork. We're not here for the big spenders. We regularly send Thomas Massey back to Congress. We're going to continue doing that, by the way. I hope we continue to do that until he's Hal Rogers' age. So we've got some we have a lot of incredible people in Kentucky, and we've built a bench too, where when we get to those higher levels, I see Kentucky being the next free state, and I think it'll be an even more successful free state than what we're seeing in New Hampshire. Even I think that Kentucky is the next breaking point for a truly constitutional conservative Commonwealth.
I 100% agree with you on that, because the whole time we were talking, I was thinking about that comparison as New Hampshire being the free state, but Kentucky actually has the representatives that represent a free state on a national level. So I tend to concur with that. I would ask you to read my VA lady's question right here. So what's TJ's opinion on Trump wanting to primary Massey?
Yeah, I mean, I think Donald Trump needs to fire whoever told him it was a good idea to try to go after Thomas Massey. And look, Donald Trump is the president of the United States, so he's the chief executive of a nation of almost 400 million people. He's not keeping tabs of everything and anything going on. So personnel is policy. And there are people in Trump's administration that are fundamentally misleading him, because I can tell you, you talk to the supporters of Donald Trump who really keep tabs, they'll know Thomas Massey was MAGA before MAGA was a thing. And truly making America great again, truly reining in our debt, truly stopping the administrative state, truly making sure that we're not putting our grandchildren tens upon tens, possibly into the hundreds in my lifetime, of trillions of dollars of debt, not printing money like we actually have it to spend. So I think it was a fundamentally bad idea for whoever gave him that advice to go after Thomas Massey. He needs to be going after people like Lindsey Graham. He needs to be going after people like Dan Crenshaw, the individuals who have never seen a war that they don't want people my age to fight and die in, whether that be in America's interests or not. You know, those are the things that we voted for. We didn't vote for an administration that's going to go after Thomas Massey. That's not what we voted for. That's not what people voted for at all. So I think that when he's being there, with there being calls to primary as well, this far out, I think that was dipping the toe in the water as well. You know, I mean, if you really want to take someone out in the primary, you blindside them right before election day. And I have experience doing that. I can tell you about, so the individual I referenced, Steve Doan. He ran against an individual who had been in some form of elected office since I was 8 years old, and maybe even before that. I don't know about his county track record. Guy was a big spender, voted against gun rights, voted to fund abortion clinics with tax dollars. I mean, just a horrific voting record. 5 days before the election, I put out a mailer through a nonprofit that didn't tell people how to vote, but just exposed a few things about that individual. It was classified as the most brutal attack ad in Kentucky history, and Steve Doan won by 200 votes. Right? I didn't signal that I was going to do that. I just did it. Right? So I think that was more of a dipping the toe in the water just to see if things had changed, because Thomas is kind of inoculated on this. There was an effort to take him out in 2020. It failed miserably. Thomas won by 60 points. 2022, they tried again. Thomas wins by just as wide, if not a wider margin. I don't know the exact numbers. There's another effort, and this time it's clear the institutions are going to back this guy. The best that they could find to try to run against Thomas Massey was an individual who is on probation for pursuing and attempting an illicit interaction with his underage nephew, who donated to Hillary Clinton. I mean, this guy. So you're not going to find a serious person to run against Thomas.
That's to me. I'm gonna let Chubb go, but that's impressive to me that you would put that type of person up against Thomas Massey as if like, hey, we're about to put a dent in his armor with this Choma. that is a bold move, right?
It's a bold move, Cotton.
Right. And here's the thing. You go and talk to supporters of President Trump like myself, and you ask us what we believe in. It's Thomas Massey's platform. It's Ron Paul's platform. It's Pat Buchanan's platform. Those are the people that we actually believe in, right? And that's the thing, is that Kentucky's 4th district every 2 years is reminded regularly of how incredible of a congressman that they have. And 2026 is going to be no different.
Indeed. Tub.
All right, so I've been sitting here just kind of, I'm just trying to figure out the best order to go through these. So let's start for me, which maybe leads into the other ones. So you registered as a libertarian. Shortly later, when you decide, hey, no, I'm going to run as a Republican, or are you going to be registered as a Republican? Was that really?
I had no intentions of running for office. I just wanted to be able to participate in Republican primaries to make sure we're getting real constitutional conservatives elected. We're a close primary state, and by being registered third party, I'm forfeiting my right to participate in that. And in many ways, my registration in the Republican Party, in the Libertarian Party, was a protest in the direction that the Republican Party was heading in when I initially registered. I thought that we were going to get like John Kasich or Marco Rubio, the individuals who Rubio has evolved, but think about 2015 and 2016, Rubio was the arch neoconservative. Jeb Bush was the arch neoconservative, right? The endless war individuals who just want to spy on Americans and create the only empire in world history where we're expected to pay taxes to better the colonies. That's not how empires were ever designed to work. I'm against empire entirely, but if we're going to have an empire, at least make sure that the Americans are the ones benefiting from it. But that's the thing, is that there was a true America Last attitude in the Republican Party when I came of age, to where I could register to vote when I was getting my driver's license, and the next election cycle was going to be an opportunity where I could vote. And I decided I'm going to protest that direction. And I think we've thoroughly shirked that neoconservative angle that we have now. Of course, there's stragglers, but that's why we need more people getting involved in Republican primaries, to make sure we actually have true pro-liberty, America First constitutional conservatives getting into office. So whether that's through open primaries or getting into the Republican Party and truly pushing these grassroots values, that was the way that I did that. I really didn't have that many political ambitions at the time. I was always involved and more just an activist than anything. But the run for office, that wasn't even a thought. Actually, it was a thought that came up less than a month before I filed the paperwork to run.
Oh, let's also be abundantly clear. The fact that you registered at 17, that was like 5 weeks ago for you, because you're still a child. Okay. You're still like, oh, like you are the age of my youngest son. All right. So inside of that, I go, oh my goodness. So let me ask you this, though. So do you tend to say that, yes, you are more of a Republican than you are a libertarian?
I don't think libertarian is a good noun. I think it's an
Okay.
adjective, right? I'm libertarian on foreign policy. I'm libertarian on, if I don't want the government involved, then you're libertarian on that issue, right? No one is truly libertarian on everything, because there's always a point where someone's going to say force is justified, right? Everyone has their limitations to that. So I wouldn't necessarily say I'm more Republican or more libertarian. Like, yes, I'm a member of the Republican Party. The platform that we have is, I think, terrific. That being said, libertarianism is the foundation of conservatism, and even presidents like Ronald Reagan acknowledged that as well, right? Because if you're a conservative, well, what are you trying to conserve?
Conserve.
Right? So for me, it's adherence to the Constitution.
So now, okay, now I'm trying to see, because you kind of answer some of that as we go along. So, what do you find are some of the more libertarian ideas that you have, and maybe what ways do you struggle to try to get other people inside the Republican Party to get on board with you?
I mean, when I think about that, like the absolute adherence to the United States Constitution, the substantive liberty amendments that we have in the First Amendment through the 10th Amendment, those are all fundamentally designed to protect individual liberty. And unfortunately, there are times where individual rights seem to take a back step for individuals. I'm also a trial attorney. I do criminal defense, and let's be very clear. Like, think about one of the top issues of political weaponization of government with the treatment of January 6 defendants. Well, it's the surveillance state that Republicans voted for that prompted the ability to identify all of these defendants. It's the NICS system that is currently, despite these individuals receiving a pardon, resulting in several January 6 defendants being denied firearms purchases, right? That a whole lot of Republicans voted for. It's getting them to realize that if we actually took the Constitution as written in the 1780s, as amended in 1791, 1868, so on and so forth, the founding fathers would be rolling in their grave at least 95% of the laws on the books at the federal level, and many of the laws at the state level. Realizing that it's not doing nothing that is important, that we need to be proactive and we actually need to go on the offensive, right? That's where a lot of the real struggle is. It isn't necessarily agreement with the principles. It's just getting them on board with the need to push forward. It's not enough. Look, I will say, as a legislator, it is more important to kill bad bills than to pass good bills. But we also need to pass the good bills too. We need to protect property rights. We need to drastically cut spending. And that's a really tough issue to sell in Kentucky. We're one of the most dependent states on the federal government. We receive way more than we send in. And I'm not saying we should be sending in to the federal government. We should be receiving much less. We should be way more sufficient as a sovereign. And look, we just reduced the income tax from 4% to 3.5%. I was happy to vote for that. I would have rather voted to abolish the income tax altogether. But also, it's pretty difficult to get consensus about cutting $5.5 billion, which we would have to do. Thankfully for Kentucky, we're a balanced budget state. You have to have a balanced budget. We are not allowed to take on debt. That's great. What's not great is the taxes that we have, because so many people are like, well, we've been spending this money for so long. Well, that doesn't mean you should keep doing it.
Well, I want to tell you, you're welcome for the federal dollars coming from California. I just want to, Eric.
We would rather you keep those and leave us alone. All right, keep your money and leave us alone.
I'm just saying, if you're going to look at California for anything, we contribute far more than we receive from the federal government. That is one of the few victories that I can claim. So if
That's
you
about the only one.
Well, it's not the only one. It's very few.
I say you just wanted to get on here and. Before we got started, he was sitting here singing about how much he loves Gavin Newsom out there. Like he's on board with him. And so that's why he's trying to get a little plug on there. Like, hey, my boy Gavin, it's not so bad. See, because here's what happens. People like Marcus, so TJ, I don't know how well you know Marcus, but he's a phony. All right.
We don't know each other. This is the first time we met.
He hides behind this. I'm libertarian, and he's really not. He belongs out. He's out there in California where he belongs. Now, real quick though, let me ask this. So what do we see with the Liberty Caucus inside the Republican Party? Is it growing? Is it kind of stagnant? I mean, because you're saying that you guys are going to be the forefront of moving things forward again. So I think that, do you think that the Liberty Caucus has to get back to moving again and become active?
It absolutely has to be active, but we are growing, and we're growing exponentially in Kentucky. I'm just thinking about where we were at in 2020. We had one Liberty senator, John Schickel, very, very good. We had one representative, Savannah Maddox. We had allies, but we didn't like the true near North Star Liberty people. Now in the Senate, we have Steve Rawlings, we have Lindsey Tishner, we have Jay Williams, we have Aaron Reed. So there's 4 in the Senate, which that's more than 10% of the Senate. In the House, we still have Savannah, myself, Felicia Rayburn, Steve Doan, Marianne Proctor, Josh Calloway, Candy Massaroni, Shane Baker, Kim Holloway out in far west Kentucky, who did a DIY campaign. I mean, just the growth is astonishing. And on top of that as well, the courage of the Liberty Caucus is courageous. So House Bill 1 was cutting the income tax. House Bill 2 was my bill that helps reaffirm gold and silver as honest money in Kentucky. House Bill 6 was the REINS Act that makes it to where if the executive branch promulgates a regulation in Kentucky that costs over $500,000 in 2 years, it doesn't go into effect unless the legislature takes a vote on it. We had Senate Bill 84 that got through, that got rid of Chevron deference, which was just the judiciary giving unlimited deference to executive branch agencies, which that's not what separation of powers was designed to do. These are all things that got backed by leadership, because I think leadership has to recognize that we are becoming more liberty as a whole as well, and we are growing drastically. We had one major win where an individual did more of a DIY campaign as well, took out an incumbent. He unfortunately lost in the general by just a sliver. But his name, funny enough, is Thomas Jefferson. And I'm hoping he runs again, because goodness,
name recognition couldn't push him over.
I just wanted to say this. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it was a very purple district, and unfortunately, DIY camp, you just get burned out so quickly because when you're out knocking 200 doors a day and just you do that in the primary, and then you have a competitive general, you just goodness, like
So,
Thomas did a
so
great
you're
job on that one,
so you're
but yeah,
12 years old, and you're 12 years old. You got elected, and which now let me ask you this real quick, then, and then I'll pass it off probably to Eric at that point. And
No,
so,
to me
what?
then, Eric. I'm gonna segue Eric in. Okay, so go ahead.
All right. So, what was your when you ran? What was your primary purpose? What was your primary issue?
my primary issue was keeping my opponent out of office, but
Oh,
also just
okay.
generally
Just
my primary purpose was restoring the legitimate role of government, protecting life, protecting liberty, protecting property. But I was up against an individual, also a Hillary Clinton donor, funny enough, who voted to give $35 million of tax dollars to an abortion clinic, who vehemently opposed school choice, not on any of the grounds like Murray Rothbard opposed it on, but on the grounds that fundamentally he believed that education needs to be a monopoly and that parents' voices matter less than these institutions that he grew up in and ultimately made his career through. He was a career politician who'd held some form of elected office since the year I was born, regularly voted to raise property taxes, which is something I think we need to abolish if I'm being completely blunt.
uh-huh.
So we get
I
this.
have a plan.
So, right.
Sorry, go
And
ahead.
he
Every time
out,
somebody mentions property tax, either usually Eric will kind of chime in. Tom has a plan. I have a plan. So every time somebody says, I feel like I gotta go. I got a plan. So I'm sorry.
oh, I
Continue.
mean, I have a plan on that. Cut spending so we can afford to do it and make sure that that is the number one priority once we get rid of the income taxes, get rid of that as well. I don't like trading taxes. Okay. What I like doing is I like cutting spending so that way we're eliminating those taxes. But above and beyond that, just it was a fundamental of Boone County is a good, God fearing county of amazing people who deserved a representative way better than what they had in the running. And I was fresh out of law school. I'd only been sworn in as an attorney for a month and 6 days when I initially filed to run for office. So I was very, very new to all this. But genuinely, we just couldn't find anyone else. And once I got in, I just figured I'm just going to try with everything I've got throughout this legislative career to show you can be an absolute adherent to the Constitution. You can go down into Frankfurt and go into that mini swamp with ideas of good policy that enhance the lives of individuals, not by government giving the handouts, but by getting government out of the way. And you can still succeed, you can still grow, and you can still like make sure that those policies aren't just completely ignored by the powers that be. And I think at least in my first session, I absolutely did that.
Now, I
Okay,
always say fine, go, black man, go.
I'm sorry, Deb,
Go
but I
ahead.
want to thank Eric Parker for reaching out to you to come on our podcast because we got people. Like I said, this is a libertarian podcast, and people were saying, "Why are you having a Republican on the podcast?" And I'm like, we listen to everyone. And that's the problem in America right now is the fact that we can't listen to everyone and let the best ideas win. That's what America used to be. It was about letting the best ideas win. And there's been a lot of bad ideas in the history of America and we have to be real with the because this is a grand experiment and it has always been labeled as such, looking for a more perfect union. And Eric, I want to thank you for bringing this registered Republican on our podcast that is bringing and expounding on true constitutional principles that we all can agree with. Because last thing I want to say before I pass it on, if you don't believe in the absolute liberty and freedoms of even those you may philosophically disagree with, you can't protect your own rights and liberties to that same principle. That doesn't mean we have to agree. That doesn't mean we have to live by their principles. That just means that we all have a seat at the table. So thank you, Eric, and thank you, TJ.
Are you
I
leaving?
appreciate it, Marcus.
You may sound like he's checking out on this. Like, okay, I'm done for the night. Y'all have a good night.
I just think,
to bring
I think
some
Marcus,
perspective.
Marcus finally is settling into the fact that there are people with good ideas outside of the Libertarian Party.
I hate Democrats and Republicans, but I like this Republican. I like TJ.
So,
Honestly,
Well,
I don't.
and
like
let's talk about
He'll
the
probably make that his next
libertarian.
campaign slogan. Marcus likes me. Listen.
You can use that 100%. I guarantee you, I'm gonna get you 8 to 10% of the black vote just by
I
that.
It's
appreciate it.
Kentucky.
And let's talk about the
that's more than-
libertarian Republican divide, though, because I think the best libertarian that I know is Ron Paul, and I don't think it's particularly close. And Ron Paul is, and he spent his entire time in office as a Republican, and by going through there, he opened up the eyes of so many people to the cause of liberty by just being there and telling the truth, speaking on the House floor against the encroaches of government, still building the relationships, being professional, but being willing to take a stand and say, like, this isn't what you campaigned on. This isn't what your district wants you to do. This isn't right. Being willing to look Rudy Giuliani in the eyes and tell him that blowback from our foreign policy was why we were attacked, at least part of it. That is an incredible, the level of bravery that took, right? And that was a platform that America got to hear because Ron Paul's a Republican. And so that's a good thing with that, right? And I like the existence of third parties to push the other parties to remember that it's not just two conversations, right? I disagree with my own caucus plenty. It happens quite frequently, and I'm glad that I'm able to do that and just present an alternative. I can think of one time where there was and unfortunately the bill is law right now. I suspect it's going to get struck down in federal court. There was a bill about getting speed cameras into Kentucky. Even with it narrowed down to only be in work zones with a worker present and an officer at the end to do the pullover, I still don't trust those camera companies as far as I could throw them. It's horrendous. It's a Sixth Amendment issue. It's a Fourth Amendment issue. And I use that as an opportunity to just get on the House floor, make the case for true constitutional conservatism, also respecting the Fourth Amendment too, of opposing mass surveillance, of opposing partnerships of government and big corporations that don't even step foot in America to spy on Americans, right? And that opportunity, I think it's pushing it in that right direction. And I'm going to push to repeal that over time. Savannah Maddox, she has been fighting against existing bans on vapes that don't have full approval from the FDA because, well, one, since when have we had to go to the federal government for permission to sell a product that contains ingredients that are 100% legal for recreational use through other means? Since when has that been the case? Whether you vape or not, right? I don't vape, but I also don't think it's the role of the government to regulate that, right? It allows for us to really start those conversations, and goodness, liberty surges in the Republican Party, and it doesn't take an overwhelming majority, but just a loud minority to really stand up and make those statements. And that's one of those things that I invite you guys to get involved with as well. Again, I love what you guys do in many ways because it's needed. Because if someone is only, like, my district is 75% red, 70%. Right? A Democrat is not going to beat me. But a primary challenger who exposes... I'm sorry?
It was 74% for you, so yeah.
In the primary.
I was in the primary.
Oh, my
So it
bad.
was 70. It was 70 in the general,
Yep.
68% the last
Sorry to
time.
interrupt.
That's it?
No, it's
Only
all.
70? Did you just not even
I
try?
know.
What is are you content with 70%? Listen,
Oh, my
you're
goal is
not,
75%.
I was gonna say it better be, or you just check out now. All right. Listen, if you're not shooting for 75 to 80, don't even run again. All right.
Yeah.
Just give up what you got. In fact, step down now. Just don't even finish out your term.
I
Just
thought this.
listen.
I thought this was an interview, not a call with my consultant. This sounds like an everyday call with my consultant.
All right.
No,
We
how much
expect the check in the mail.
how much pushback are you finding with things like that you're getting from your own party, that you kind of want to shake them a little bit and be like, dude, we're supposed to be the ones for freedom here. So there, you got to be getting a level of that, correct?
Every now and then, but I mean, I will say, generally speaking, I've been very good at keeping it to the issues as well, and overall, they respect that. And I will say, there were bills that were introduced that just conversation alone was enough to get it to stop, because the sponsor didn't think about the consequences, or they just didn't think about the political blowback that could come from it. And that's one of those whole things of like, sunshine is the best disinfectant. And
Mhm.
that's one thing I love about the legislative process being as slow as it is. The fact that it requires consensus of a majority of 100 people, all with very different walks of life. It helps really air out all of the potential issues with it. So, I mean, I get that pushback every now and then. There's obviously individuals who aren't happy that I'm in Frankfurt. My primary opponent never even called to concede that he lost, and it's funny because he once called me an election denier. So I think that's funny. That being said, I get I don't get much heat even with the really hardcore ones. It happens every now and then, but if you don't have thick skin, you shouldn't be running for office. So maybe I get a lot of heat. I just can take
You'll be
it.
doing it, yeah.
So,
So, are you suggesting that every libertarian should just run as a Republican?
I am suggesting that everyone join the Republican Party. If you believe in life,
There
liberty,
it
property,
is.
you believe in the Bill of Rights, I'm inviting you to join the Republican Party because, I mean, I need backup, right? I'm
Marcus,
1/100th of one. Oh, how's my local?
Well, no, I was making a joke with
Uh,
Marcus. Like, this is an invitation for you, Marcus, to move to Kentucky and join the Republican Party.
They've been
Absolutely.
saying that for the last few weeks, and I'm like, you guys have 4 seasons. I'm used to 2 seasons. So
We have 4 seasons in a week.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. We had that today.
so the classic answer is not right now. I like North Carolina. I got to be honest with you. I like the Raleigh
Hey,
Durham area.
come
But
on, bro.
I touched down in Kentucky. I thought I was going to Ohio, but apparently I flew from New York to whatever Cincinnati
CVG.
airport, and
You were
apparently
in
that's
my
in Kentucky.
district.
Yeah, and you guys charged me $15 a piece for a personal pizza. I have a personal beef with you because the taxes in that airport were also extraordinarily high. And I'm gonna literally pass the mic to Eric to ask you questions because you just reignited my semi hatred for the state of Ohio, and
And
now
Kentucky.
my questionable opinion of Kentucky because the airport was actually in Kentucky. So Eric, go ahead, man. Talk to this
Yeah.
guy. I'm gonna calm myself down for a second.
I kind of
So,
listen. TJ, we would like to have you on often because it makes him shut up. So we actually appreciate the fact that you're on here. Well done.
Yeah, he's
so
he's ether right now. So go ahead. Yeah.
I got a couple of questions, but the first one's gonna give Tub an opportunity to, I guess, add
Oh
a
my
little
God.
detail to the story. Sorry, Marcus. I think most everyone came to know you because of your lawsuit against the governor of Kentucky during the COVID lockdowns. Were you a legislator at the time, a candidate at the time? Were you just an angry constituent?
Just a
And
teenager.
the reason why I said Tub can, and I'm specifically talking about reopening churches during the COVID lockdown. I don't know if
Yeah.
Tub wants to
So
add some flavor to it to tell you about his situation, but it was unrelated to, I guess, the COVID at the time. Either way, Tubbs a pastor of a local church. That's the only reason why I say that.
Oh, awesome. So in 2020, I was actually getting out of politics entirely. I had just been accepted to law school. I was going to go into corporate law, make $250,000 a year straight out of law school, go into big law, do all that fun stuff. I was managing one campaign in Ohio at the time, just sort of winding it all down. Lockdowns happen, and that just reignites the flame. And I decide, like, I'm going to fight this no matter what's going on. I was anti-lockdown in March 2020. And all in all, like, it was more just whining on social media realistically and just ignoring anything that was going on, just living my life the way I otherwise would. Then on April 10th, 2020, the governor does a press conference indicating that if you are April 10th was Good Friday, by the way. And he held up this placard of the orange notice saying, if you are caught at church on Easter Sunday, Kentucky State Police, at my orders, will take down your license plate and leave this notice indicating that you are required to serve 2 weeks of house arrest, quarantine, but it was house arrest under every circumstance. It was house arrest. And if you disobey that, we're going to charge you with violating an emergency order of the governor, which carries 1 year in jail. So
now, were they being, not to cut you off, but were they being very specific towards churches in particular, or was it that was just part of the group?
It was only enforced at churches.
Okay.
It was not enforced at mosques. It was not enforced at synagogues. And I know of mosques and synagogues that did operate on Sabbath, which all respect to them. Thank God you stood up for your right to worship as you saw fit. But the only people who had any of these citations issued to them were at Christian churches on Easter Sunday. And I was one of those people.
Did law enforcement affect that degenerate order by the government?
They did take down the license plates and put them on the windshield. I don't know of anyone who got arrested for disobeying. And I was very public about disobeying, by the way. I did a live stream on Facebook. It's down now under the advice of counsel, but it's been so long. I'm like, whatever. I have a small farm in Boone County. I put up my camera. I pinned it to one of my posts, and I got an AR-15 out, and I just mag dumped into the order. And then the very next day, I filed a federal lawsuit against the governor alleging violations of the First and 14th Amendment, including, by the way, the 14th Amendment right to travel in interstate, because he also had in that order demand that you not cross state lines. And I'm right next to Ohio. There are parts in Kentucky where it is easier for me to go into Ohio and cross back into Kentucky with where I live. Because apparently COVID can tell.
I'm not impressed with any of that. I got to be. I
was gonna say you're gonna get it rolled back up again.
Yeah, this isn't my personal opinion. This is my professional opinion. I'm an ardent not fan of Ohio, and the fact that you guys put your airport in Kentucky and claim Ohio, it disheartens me to no certain degree that I'm questioning your Kentuckians' full fortitude.
That airport does not say Ohio. It just says Cincinnati.
They said I was landing in Cincinnati. I was talking crap about Ohio on the podcast page, and so many people chimed in and said, you weren't actually in Ohio. You were in northern Kentucky. That, literally dozens of people said that. That's the only reason
I want you to understand, Marcus hates your state because of an airport and pizza. All right, let's make it very clear. He thinks Kentucky should be shut down because of your airport and your pizza.
Okay, no, that is a false statement, because I even wrote on my notes about my first time interacting with Kentucky, and that was reading High Times magazines in the 90s, and Kentucky had some of the best weed east of the Mississippi. So that's my first interaction with Kentucky, and that's why I want to ask my guy. I'm not trying to put you on the spot because that's not my thing. But part of the libertarian agenda is the end of the war on drugs because it is an epic and absolute failure. Trillions of dollars. We're talking $3-4 trillion spent on the war on drugs ineffectively. And there has to be a better approach, like in Portugal when they took that approach. But the fact of the matter is a state like Kentucky is being attacked by the nation of China. And it's through a proxy war because fentanyl has hit Kentucky like much of the Rust Belt with a vengeance. And the war on drugs is an epic failure because we're not getting to the war on drugs. Is like pulling the leaves off a dandelion. It is not affecting the root cause of the problem or the root source of the problem. And the root source of the problem in general is China via Mexico that comes to the Rust Belt where, America's war on terror opened up the opium corridor via Afghanistan, and it goes on and on and on. And if you're truly being paying to geopolitical politics, you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to end it there. But where is your stance on that subject matter?
So I have a pretty complex relationship with this issue. My dad died of a drug overdose when I was 6 years old. The drug war was in full force in 2004.
Yeah.
It didn't save him. Somehow an inanimate object managed to win a war against the United States. The drugs won the drug war, plainly. And I think that's because we utilize an incarceration model on what's a faith and family model. I think Ron Paul put it best in 1988, right? You can't have the government force you to follow good habits and make good decisions. There's a nice little derogatory dig that he makes at the person who was attacking him over his view on drugs right then that I won't repeat. Actually, I will. It's the part of why don't they put you on a diet? You're a little overweight. You'd be in better health, right? I mean, everything the federal government touches fails. The federal war on drugs is an abject failure. It didn't work, right? It separates families and it gets people back into an incarceration model. And in fact, prohibition increases the risk, which increases the incentive to bring in more potent stuff so you can have a higher profit margin. It's Mark Thornton's iron law of prohibition, right? It didn't work in the 1920s. Why is it going to work now? It's not. It's a failure. There was a bill on legalizing medical marijuana. I would have been a yes vote had I been in office at the time. I was actually very public about that in 2024 when I was running, actually, because I was asked about it all the time. And frankly, it's one of those issues you have to take that stand on. And the reality is acting like the problem doesn't exist isn't going to ultimately fix the problem. So yeah, the drug war is a failure. We need to acknowledge that it's a failure that has cost taxpayers more than $1 trillion over the past 40 years. We need to. And we're not being honest with ourselves if we're not saying that it's a failure.
Tub.
That was epic. You shut the scene down. I'm trying to pass. Who's next, Tub or Eric? Where you want to go with this?
Well, so Tub, go ahead. That's where I wanted to go. I wanted to go with Tub.
All right, so actually, I want to go back a little bit because when Marcus said I couldn't talk to you anymore, and I'm like, well, I still want to talk to him. And so you mentioned earlier that you guys are a balanced budget state, and I often say that the only way that you're going to cut spending is to cut the amount of money they receive. You know what I'm saying? Because on their own, government has proven they're not going to cut back spending. Okay, so I say you have to limit what you send to them, which is my big thing is usually through property tax also. So I look at it, I go, wait a minute. Kentucky, despite the way Marcus feels about it, I think Kentucky might be a perfect place to go, wait a minute. We have to have a balanced budget. If we stop sending money into them, they have to cut spending. So it seems to me like that would be the perfect state to say, hey, wait a minute. we're going to cut back. And listen, I believe in incrementalism. I believe that even with property taxes, you can say here, and we're going to keep lowering it intentionally over the next couple of years and get us to zero. I'm fine with that model. A lot of libertarians lose their mind because we shouldn't pay it at all and all that type of stuff. So I look at it, I go, does that make sense of what I'm thinking? That in Kentucky seems like a perfect place to try something like that because they have to have that balanced budget.
It is, and we're doing that with the income tax, actually. In
Okay.
2018, the income tax was 6%. And then we started the process, and we've gotten down to 3.5%, which is great. I actually did introduce a constitutional amendment to further incentivize that what you're talking about of incremental phase outs of these taxes in order to force us to phase out the spending as well. It's called the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. It was my House Bill 756. It's actually the last bill I introduced to the session, and I did that as a message of saving the best for last because this is my number one priority bill that I anticipate is going to be a 5 to 10 year project, if I'm being completely blunt, because it's a machine change from how we do things. But if I told you that there was a state in this country where before any new tax or any new fee above the or any increase thereof is to go into effect, it has to go onto the ballot. It has to list what's getting taxed, what rate it's getting taxed at, where that money is going to go, and how much it's going to cost the average family in that state. Plus requiring every one single tax to have a sunset within so many years. And if it does not get acclimated on the ballot, it does not get reinstated. Yes. You'd think I'm talking about like Texas or New Hampshire, Florida, Alaska. I'm talking about Colorado. This is in Colorado. And it's been the law there since 1992. In fact, Jared Polis, yes, but also this provision is the only thing that is stopping Colorado from going full California. It's amazing. And Jared Polis, wanting to turn Colorado into another California, he initiated a ballot initiative to repeal these provisions. And it failed by over 30 points. Right after, literally 1 year after Jared Polis won re-election by 20 points. That is a 50-point swing of the electorate. It is unheard of. So the Taxpayer Bill of Rights is one of my number one issues because you want to do that incrementalism to force governments to really take a look. That's how you do it. Another problem we have in Kentucky with our spending habit is base budgeting. I was astonished. I didn't know this as a lifelong activist, but most government spending in Kentucky is not actually voted on by the legislature. Our budget goes for each department and says base plus, and it adds on to these. The base is just the spending that they take for granted. And in fiscal year 2025, 91% of state government spending is in the base. We only voted on 9% of the spending in 2025. We're on the right track. It's going to be 83% in fiscal year 2026, but that's not anywhere near enough. One of my campaign pledges is I will not vote for a budget if there is a penny in the base, because I think I have a duty as a legislator to examine every penny of expenditures. If there's a base, I'm not voting for it, period. So we need to get to zero base budgeting, and we need to enact the Taxpayer Bill of Rights.
I have a question about that. If you could clarify the base budget, is it kind of like a slush fund, a general fund where, well, and this is all the pre-approved government functions that we're not allowed to make cuts to? Is that kind of what?
Oh no, we're allowed to, but it is a slush fund. So yes and no. It's a slush fund. No, we're not prohibited from cutting it. We absolutely can, and this is why we need a Doge in every state and Commonwealth.
Okay, so let me interject real quick, because you touched on a point that I always like to make, where I think the legislature of the third branch of the United States needs to go back to apartheid status like they were, because most of them were planners.
Yes.
So from like roughly January through May, June, July, August. It was take care of their job, the job that they were supposed to have at the time. And I'm not going to delve into the economics or the social justice of that particular system, but during that time, they took care of what they should have been their private businesses, to which they should be taken care of. And after the harvest, they came to the state capitals and the nation's capital and took care of the legislative business of this enterprise of the republic of where we live. And they weren't full time. The point of the matter is they weren't full time sitting here making laws all the time. And there's no way you can have an independent republic. There's no way you can have a true liberal, old school liberal system of government where everybody was allowed to live their lives that they saw fit, as long as they weren't harming any others. How far are we as the Libertarian Party away from injecting that into the mainstream course of the of this conversation that we're having as a society?
Well, that's already the standard in Kentucky. We are a part-time legislature here. Now, at the federal level, you guys are far away. I want to get back to that because I think Twain put it perfectly that no man's life, liberty, or property is safe when the legislature is in session. But also, no man's life, liberty, or property is safe when the executive branch is ruling by regulation. I want to get that under control first and foremost. And with what time it is, I think at the federal level, look, in principle, yeah, I want a part-time legislature, but I want a super hyperly involved legislature at the federal level right now in terms of policing itself and the other branches, because we need to do that first. We need to get rid of executive branch lawmaking. We did a great thing with Chevron deference, and it's being done away with at the federal court level. But the ability to regulate is still there. The Administrative Procedure Act is still there, which APA was originally designed to rein in the administrative state, but then all the vaguities of the APA was enough to still allow the administrative state to do what it does. There needs to be drastic reform to this. We need a Supreme Court that's ready to pull the trigger on what Clarence Thomas is banging his drum on for years, which is reviving the non-delegation doctrine, that the only people who can truly put out new rules that bind the people are the lawmakers. Once we've done that, then yes, that should be one of the number one conversations being had about trying to make the legislature trying to make Congress part-time. Now, I will say, with how often they're out of session, it seems like they're part-time as is. The number of hours they work, I'd say they're absolutely they're part-time, six-figure salary. Goodness, I envy that, but wouldn't want it. We do need to get back to part-time legislating.
I guess in order to get back on the federal level to part-time legislation, is it going to require some type of a lawsuit to make it to the Supreme Court? Do you think we could get enough elected officials from any party to actually pass a bill to rein any of that in? What's your thoughts?
Maybe when I'm in my 70s. I mean, so but the thing is, and here's the thing. We focus on the federal level way too much. And look, that is the Leviathan, but you can't take on the Leviathan if you haven't built a bench at the state levels, at enough state levels, right? There's always this conversation that I get asked about of like, well, what are we going to do to take over the Republican Party of Kentucky? And I'm like, have you taken over your county party? That's one of my first questions that I ask, because they haven't even taken over their county party. Once you take over the critical mass of county parties, then have the conversation about taking over your district parties by congressional district, then go to the state, right? Likewise, we need a critical mass of state legislators in a critical mass of states. So that way we have a bench of individuals who have frankly, the experience. And look, I agree that experience should not be the number one qualifier when you are voting in an election, obviously. But voters do consider that. One of the top objections I got when I was knocking on doors was, what experience do you have? And I was luckily able to talk about my legal experience, suing the governor, fighting for gun rights through the National Association for Gun Rights, groups like that, right? I was able to actually show, like, look, I do have lived experience. I'm young, but the reality is people do care about that stuff. And if I ran for Congress, well, for one, I would never run against Thomas Massey, but suppose it was an open seat. If I ran for Congress in 2024, I would get creamed, right? We need to be building those benches and getting those institutions at the state level first and foremost. It's a whole lot easier to do it as well. There's only 45,000 people in my district. There's 750,000 in my congressional district, right? So you build that bench, then we get up to that. And if we follow a true model to ensure that we do that, where we have people knocking on the doors, getting the name ID of these people up, one of these days we might actually reach that critical mass, not to completely eviscerate Leviathan, but enough to at least rein it in to where it's at a tolerable level. And I'm not saying it's going to be a 100% resounding victory. I'm not guaranteeing that, but that is the only way. That is the only way with the federal government as it is currently structured, that is.
So a couple things. One is, all right, you already ruined it because I did ask if Thomas Massey was full on limiting your future, because he kind of is, because you're in his district, so you're not going to run against him. And if you did, you're not going to win. So I don't know if that kind of limits you a little bit in how you move forward.
Not really.
But let me ask you this though: the one thing that you said where I'm like, I don't think that's a solid answer. Okay, in that, so you probably heard of David Webb. And so David Webb, I don't know, I'm sure you've heard of him. And the one issue I always have with David Webb is that whenever anybody comes with an idea, he's very kind of, no, we can't do that. And he really kind of settles into, well, it's just the nature of things. And when you were saying that, like, I get what you're saying, but I'm going, what you're basically saying the model is just to keep waiting longer and longer. And the problem that we have, we go after federal. The problem that we have, though, is the longer federal has, the more power they seem to be taking. So I think that if we don't do something, I don't think we have the luxury anymore of saying, hey, let's get our local right. I agree with you that we have to. But I think that if we keep kind of kicking that can down the road, we'll get there. By the time we do, that Leviathan is going to full on take over control. And so what is the alternative? So I think there has to be something that says focus on locals good, but that's not solving the problem.
I agree. It's not a full solution. That being said, any of y'all from Virginia?
Nope.
Oh,
It's right up there.
Okay.
Though.
I was going to make the joke. I'm from Kentucky. Because if someone was from Virginia, I was about to say our states our commonwealths have a pretty remarkable resolution in 1798. I'm a full believer that states need to flex their nullification powers and refuse to comply with overreaching federal control. That's an immediate fix there. You get enough representatives willing to do it. In fact, my state senator, Steve Rawlings, introduced a bill on Kentucky asserting its sovereignty and refusing to go along with unconstitutional federal law.
How far did it go?
It got a decent number of co-sponsors. It was referred to a committee, didn't get heard, but that's what I mean. We need more people at the state level, right? But also, in furtherance of this, anyone know who Eric Burleson is?
No.
He is a congressman out of Missouri, very underrated, very good on the issues, great voting record. Not as good as Thomas Massey, but I could say that about the other 434 members of Congress. So, if the standard is not as good as Thomas Massey, that means the guy's pretty good, right? If that's the worst thing I can say about him. He started out as a state representative. And he served a couple terms in the state house, showed his chops, demonstrated that he's not going to sell out. And then he made the run for Congress, and he kicked butt in the primary and got in the general. Right. So that's the thing of, like, that is a pathway to victory that if you, one, start the nullification train, but two, find the exceptional state representatives, get them into federal office where they're needed, the pathway to victory is there. Also, suing the hell out of individuals who violate constitutional rights and
That sounds like
finding
an
them
attorney right there.
improper.
There it is.
Yes.
There's that lawyer talk
Yeah,
coming in. Sue them all.
I will say,
Just sue 'em.
look, one of my favorite lawsuits that I'm doing right now, I got to sue Merrick Garland before he left.
Nice.
I had a client who voluntarily sought mental health care treatment in almost a decade ago, and they used him voluntarily seeking mental health care to deny him a firearms purchase. And we won on the motion to dismiss practice. Motion to dismiss denied. Holding of the law of the case is that if the facts we asserted in the complaint are true, which they are, it violates the Second Amendment, clearly. And so my view of it is we need a war on all fronts approach when it comes to reining in the federal government. I think that in terms of getting people into Congress, the best way is get them into state legislatures first and foremost. Unless there's like a remarkable case, like Ron Paul. Does everyone know how Ron Paul won his run for Congress?
No.
He delivered his voting base. He was the community OBGYN.
Oh, yeah.
He had delivered babies for so many of these people that they all knew
Yeah,
Dr. Paul.
Yeah.
Right? So he was able to send that message to people who knew him, right? So of course there's going to be exceptions to the rules. Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of the better ones. I know, not the most libertarian person, but she's pretty great, paleoconservative at worst. She was not an office holder. She just had really good community relations. So there's always exceptions to the rule. But I think that war on all fronts approach, but especially the number one way to really test whether someone is truly the real deal is get them into a lower level elected position and see how they behave.
What they do. Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Right.
Is there anybody else you represented it as an attorney?
You know, one of my first filings as an attorney was a cert petition to the United States Supreme Court challenging the congressional mask mandate. I was one of the attorneys for Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Ralph Norman when we sued Nancy Pelosi over that. That was fun. I've got some cases in the pipelines I'm not quite at liberty to discuss under attorney-client privilege. There was a tweet just today from one of my clients. I am one of Kyle Rittenhouse's attorneys. And I will say, what Carmelo Anthony's spokesperson said, it is absolutely defamatory, and I am absolutely looking into that.
Okay.
All right.
So we're coming up on. Usually we go 45 minutes to an hour. We're coming up. Is there anything you want to let the American people know on the only real libertarian podcast that has ever existed that you truly want the American people to know about you or anything that you're passionate about?
Sure. I mean, one of the things I just want to talk about, don't underestimate yourself. When I was first approached about running for office, I thought that the individual asking me was crazy. And then I got in and I thought, all right, well, I'm never going to get any legislation through. And then I did. I got through House Bill 2, which that's a reserved number, by the way. You don't get that unless it's given priority status by leadership, which I was able to get because we repealed the sales and use taxes on gold and silver, which I believe is the only honest constitutional money under the United States Constitution. And the governor of Kentucky continued collecting those taxes. So I introduced a bill that, rather than repealing and reenacting the sales tax cut, makes it clear that that tax cut was valid. If you were illegally taxed, you are entitled to a refund with interest, with attorney fees. And if the governor continues collecting these taxes, you're also entitled to $1,000 per day upon collection. So
hold on, payable
by the governor individually and through his office.
Okay.
Joint and several liability. So specifically his office, because we are not going to bail him out in the budget year. It is not happening. Oh, I will kill the budget on the floor if we bail him out. If a lawsuit is successful against him on this, I will make sure it does not have the votes. I will 100% make sure of that. I can tell you that much. I don't care what procedural games I have to play. I will. But I also don't think they're going to because
on the Black Tower
because I'm going to be
podcast.
level. This legislature is sick of the governor. They're sick of him because he is fundamentally one of the worst individuals that you can have. If you're terrified of an overreaching executive branch, understand that the executive branch of the Commonwealth of Kentucky almost put me in jail for going to church. Andy Beshear is running for president in 2028, and stopping him from becoming the president should be one of the number one priorities because he has no respect for law. He has no respect for natural law. He has no respect for the Constitution. He has no regard for the fundamental liberties of the people. But to really close this out, really don't underestimate yourself because it doesn't take much to really make a difference. You are way more powerful than you realize. But the fact is, you've just got to get into it and just get to work on it. I think it's
Marcus? Marcus, because Eric and I have both actually run for city council. That's how we actually met. We were running for city council.
We didn't win, but we ran.
Neither one of you can do this. TJ Roberts, you have the express written consent of the Black Powder podcast to use any soundbite that you just said, which was very profound, in campaign ads or quotes on any sort of media that you want to use. And I salute you, sir, for saying what you said, because that's, excuse me, Tub, for what I'm about to say. That's real shit. You know, if you believe that, and if you believe that for every single American, you are what America is about. That's the thing. Go ahead and go forth. And the number one impediment to everything Americans have ever wanted to do was government. And getting it out of the way should be the primary aspect of being a libertarian or Republican. And I will venture to say, if you're a real Democrat, like the old school Democrats, like Tub and I were talking about from the 90s, that's what it was about. It was about government not being in your way as long as you're not doing any harm to others. Everybody has the right to believe what they want to believe. And with that being said, I'm going to say, TJ, how can people follow you, read more about you, and support you? So
absolutely. So my X is at real TJ Roberts. My campaign website is votetjr.com. My personal cell number is 859-446-0185. And if you want to support my campaign for re-election, you can go to votetjr.com/donate. I'm generally an open book. I try to answer questions. Text is probably the best way to reach me through the cell phone there, but also I keep my DMs open on X as well. So any of those ways to reach me.
Dude, I just heard that Mike Jones song when you said that.
Everybody,
Mike Jones. Eric, how can they follow and reach you, Eric?
At Eric P904 on X, Eric Parker, Bold Liberty on Facebook. You ain't getting my personal number.
Word.
But
hey,
I was gonna say, we're gonna stop right about there.
I want to ask, and you don't gotta answer now. I don't want to put you on the spot, but it'd be really cool if you could try to get Thomas Massey to come on our podcast. So if you can help, I asked Justin Amos when we had him on the podcast, and he said he'll let him know. And we hadn't heard nothing.
We would like you to spend all of your political capital that you have with Massey just to come on this podcast. Don't worry about any legislation. Don't worry about any future running for office. Get him here. Use everything you have to get him here.
I'll send him this show and say, like, hey, these guys want you on.
Heck yeah.
So I'm going
We'll
to put
see.
this out there. If we don't get them on after you
We're
send
blaming
them,
you.
I
We're
rescind
blaming
all
TJ.
the
TJ
rights.
sucks.
No, I rescind all the rights to the captions and the sound bites that you said tonight that were so awesome. And we're gonna sue you at $50,000 per sound bite. And it's nothing personal. This is business, bro. You know, you understand that. As we all are capitalists, this is strictly business. But dude, this was we've had Republicans on here on the Only Real Libertarian podcast, but you are up there with my top 2-3 favorite Republicans that we've had on here, and I truly thank you for coming on. I would love to have you on as a guest towards the end of the year, and a 6-month. You qualify for that every 6-month guest in my
Awesome.
book.
Appreciate it.
And, that's a
anytime
badge
you
of
want,
honor.
TJ. Yeah,
Yeah,
anytime you want, TJ, you're welcome. Just let us know. Or if there's anything we can
100%.
do with your campaign,
Yeah,
or however
we'll
we can
support
help,
your campaign 100%.
or with legislation, lawsuits, anytime you're suing the government, just share it. We'll retweet it on X or whatever. I guess repost, not retweet, but you get a point. Appreciate
Awesome.
it.
Well, I appreciate it.
Okay, so this is the Black Powder Podcast, and I literally have tattooed on me "Live Free or Die," and that's how we always end this podcast. Tub, you have anything to say? But going into the holiest of holiest weekend, do you want to tell our people anything?
Yes, Marcus, you in particular, you need Jesus. All right. So keep that in mind. And be sure to tell everybody else the same thing. But especially you, Marcus. Especially you. All
I will
right.
say this: feet of brass, hair of wool, eyes red.
No,
Sheep, sheep.
Jesus was not a high black man. All right. Let's be very clear about this.
We don't know that for sure. We're gonna leave
No, I
that
feel
to
pretty
the
confident
people
about
to
it.
decide that. Eric, do you have anything else to say?
Nope, just holding it down in North Carolina. Thanks for coming on, TJ. It was a pleasure.
TJ, do you want to tell
Thanks,
any
man.
of your people anything on Resurrection Weekend? Resurrection Weekend.
I thank you all so much. The true authority on this world is that of God's. Understand that there are some things that truly are worth fighting for. The fight for my right to practice my faith was what got me back into politics. Really think about those things that truly matter to you, what you will truly fight for, and keep that at heart. Keep that as your North Star. Never give up. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much. This has been the Black Powder Podcast. As we always close in the state, whatever of New Hampshire, whatever they call it, live free
Or
or
die.
die.